So Scott Talley here from the worldwide headquarters of Network in Action, and today we're sitting down with Todd Sagissor of PaymentsGallery.com, which is a really unique and creative superstore for point-of-sale equipment. Before we jump into Payments Gallery, I want to talk to our audience a little bit about the mistakes people make. Almost every business owner ultimately is probably going to be taking credit cards, and like everything, it's an ever-changing industry, right?
It is, and there's a lot of self-starter models out there. Most people are familiar with Square and PayPal. That's could be a good place to start, especially if people don't have a lot of sales volume. But at some point, they're going to reach a threshold where there's either a need for customer service, deeper integration with technology, and products like that just won't accomplish it.
Yeah, it's really changed from the old days when you opened a business and you obviously either used your bank or contacted some payment card system, had a little piece of equipment in your office, and so there's lots of different applications. So let's jump into that and talk about some of those applications. So new business owner starting their business, they've heard of Square, they go online, they order a Square, and they start processing credit cards. And I've had some personal experience with that. It's not all that it's cracked up to be.
Well, without getting into the conspiracy theory side of it, the Square readers are notoriously bad for going bad. And what happens is they bill it on what's called a low swipe rate or a chip card rate. But a lot of times, if you're out there trying to conduct business, the reader's not working or connecting to your phone properly. So you're sitting there manually typing everything in, and then you're going to be at the highest rate threshold. So that's one of the main detriments for a business.
Yeah, there are a couple others. I know that I had an experience early on years ago where I had a chargeback, and it was something ridiculous that I don't remember exactly all the details, but I remember the outcome was really unpleasant to where they blocked my account and charged me a higher fee, and I had to wait for a refund. It was all kind of crazy things going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't avoid chargebacks completely in the industry, but that's one of the major mistakes small businesses make starting out is they just think, hey, I'm going to take an easy payment, and then they don't convey the terms and conditions to their end customer. And if there's a problem in that service delivery or the product isn't what you expect, by rights and all purposes, the customer should be able to get their money back or some sort of recourse on it. And what happens is if a business isn't prepared to have a reversal out of their account, then they're not processing correctly. And then, systems like PayPal or Square will actually freeze an account or hold money that comes in. And we've heard horror stories as long as 21 days. And I mean, it's hard to operate cash flow wise if you have your money on hold for 21 days.
That's exactly what happened to us. So buyer beware there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move off of our beating up of PayPal and Square, but let's move into when a business owner is looking down, they really need to look and talk to an expert because of their application. Not everyone's got a retail operation. So talk about some of the different applications that are out there.
Yeah, that's correct. So in today's day and age, we call it omni-commerce, and that's a term that's used when you're trying to maybe sell out of a retail storefront or even a mobile business. You also want to synchronize it with online sales or maybe portable sales out there in the public, trade shows and things like that. You can also have just an online business as a whole with no retail storefront, as you said. And then there's the component of service-based businesses. There's also a new trend in what's called in-app payments. And so if you're a software developer and you're trying to take payment within an application itself, there's a whole methodology with that, very similar to like a mobile payment or a wallet. And that's a deeper integration, but that's gaining a lot of popularity as well.
And obviously that's more of a reason why you need a point of contact, somebody you can call on and have these questions answered. Let's back up a minute. So educate us on how many people have their hands in the credit card, in the processing of a credit card payment. So if I contract with a company like yours, how many different people get a piece of that percentage that I'm paying for that charge?
Well, Scott, that's a secret, and I can't tell you. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, that's a really good question. And the thing that I usually like to lead with is the United States as a whole is one of the most unusual countries when it comes to credit card processing because, in a sense, compared to other countries, we're still the Wild West out there. So you can have banks that help you process. You can go to a fintech company like PayPal or Square online. There's a lot of other independent sellers and resellers and sellers of resellers, and then they always talk about the middleman that's involved and things like that. So what we do is because of our retail showroom, we want to be very public in the face, kind of like an Apple store or a Microsoft store for payments. So it's an interactive experience. People come in, they can touch it and try it before they buy it. They don't get the surprises, and then they get that consulting as you were talking about along the way. The benefit with that is we're able to broker solutions. So rather than, say, for example, walking into your traditional bank, and most banks now don't even process internally, they just spin it out the back door. They're more interested in posting results on Wall Street than helping businesses on Main Street, unfortunately. But what happens is we can essentially work in comparison with any bank or credit union or savings account, deposit the money in there, set them up. We can shop, 6 to 12 different processors, find them the best solution with the equipment combination, software, and all of that. And at the end of the day, they've got a solution that really works for their business rather than somebody who doesn't really know much at a bank saying, oh, I think this is what you need. And then they just plug it in. And it's kind of like that proverbial square peg in a round hole. I talk to business owners all the time that are out of an office building and they have a credit card terminal at their place. And I'm like, why were you set up with a credit card terminal? You don't even see customers face to face. And that's part of the problem that we still deal with today.
So if you're not dealing with a bank, you're probably dealing with a salesperson who may or may not have been with a company very long. There's several companies out there from Heartland to what a couple of the other...
Well, the bottom line is, without naming names, so to speak, we have really good relationships. In fact, Heartland is a good referral partner for us because a lot of those companies don't want to get into the point of sale and payment technology. They want to specialize in their track that they're on, which is fine. Those are great referral partners for us in the community and otherwise. But, what I caution business owners on is, when it comes down to something as critical as your cash flow, you need to work with somebody who's experienced and trained and will be there, not here today and gone tomorrow. So in the same way you trust a financial advisor, an attorney for your business, those core accounting things, that's the same that you want to look for in a payment solution provider. And so it's just the availability and the knowledge base to pull from.
It makes sense. And so let's talk about some of these different applications again. So you have some businesses that are swiping a card at retail. Mm-hmm. You have other businesses that are taking credit cards over the internet or their website, e-commerce. What are some of the other kind of applications?
Well, so one of the things that kind of explains the entire spectrum of how credit card processing can work is like maybe a healthcare facility or a dentist office or a doctor's office. So imagine the last time you were in a place like that. You walk up, in most cases you do a copay at the counter. So that's a retail interaction, but that's not the extent of all the transactions that happen in that business. Now, for some reason there's, your copay doesn't fully kick in or you have to owe more at the end. They have a back office that'll also do follow-up with you to remit payment. A lot of times those back offices need to use an invoicing mechanism or some sort of telephone tree to call in. You get the invoice by mail, call or go to our website. Now you're interacting with a website payment button. Maybe there's, in a worst case scenario, somebody can't make all the payments and they get on a collection type of cycle and they haven't turned it over to a third-party collection company, but there's an entirely different division in there that handles just lagged invoices. And they need to put somebody on a payment plan or a recurring cycle. So now you have an entire spectrum of payments that happen, in a sense, in one company. And we have solutions to be able to fit that entire environment.
In those environments, are people paying a different rate for different types of processing?
Well, so again, in the U.S., there's a misconception because I think a lot of it has to do with those flat rate programs that places like PayPal and Square roll out. The reality of it is there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of classifications of rates. Most people don't realize that. You can go to Visa and MasterCard's website and download their PDF guides, and literally you'll have a stack of paper like that. Now, not every rate will apply to every single business because they break it out for travel and restaurants and hospitality and pay at the pump and all of that. So at the end of the day, it's what are the customer demographics that actually walk into that business. So hypothetically, just using the NIA business model, because this comes up too with some of the consulting we do, most people that are in NIA are business owners. They're entrepreneurs. Maybe they're corporations or LLCs. And so those banks that issue those cards have an entity behind the individual or in front of the individual. Therefore, those rates are going to be higher because they're a B2B transaction than if I were just a general consumer with my plain old debit card. And so what happens is what's called an effective rate, the total fees that are done at the end of the month by the time all the funding clears, can vary in a B2B business versus the restaurant that's down the street versus somebody that's operating an ice cream shop or something like that. Because it depends on the size of the ticket, your average ticket, the risk of the business model. There's a lot of actual factors that go into the final rates.
And at the end of the day, somebody's taking a risk by accepting that credit card, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're funding the money and...
Well, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is, I get on some of these online forums and people are like, oh, that bank held my money or they're ripping me off or it's a scam. Well, the reality of it is it's probably most likely not a scam. It's just the end user's lack of experience. They got in over their head because they didn't know what they were doing. So let's say a hypothetical scenario, this coming holiday season, I come out with a new widget. And this is going to be the next hot topic. And I'm going to pre-order or pre-sell on the internet. I take all sorts of orders. All of a sudden, I'm running up $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a month in sales. And now my supplier from China lets me know that they've had some sort of bottleneck with tariffs or whatever the case is. And they won't be able to ship until January now and not in November, what I was hoping. Mm-hmm. I've got a problem. So I either need to realistically communicate with all of my customers that have placed orders and said, hey, this is a backlog or a problem. We'll work out a discount or some sort of offset to that if you want to continue, or I should refund your money. Now, if I were an unscrupulous guy and I'm looking at my bank account going, oh man, I just, I cleared like $200,000, in the last few months through my merchant account, I'm just shutting my business down. I'm going to disappear with this money. I haven't had to buy any product. It's going to be on delay. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, that's exactly what businesses did back in the dot-com bubble and a lot of the other things that we've seen over the history of transaction processing. At the end of the day, somebody is responsible for those fees. And the processor that approved that business is the one who ends up paying back the card associations and the consumers that actually bought that product. And that's why there's the funding holds and things like that. Because at the end of the day, they're trying to give the business a fair shake to say, hey, in that transaction that you processed, was it a defective issue? Did they get it and not understand the billing charge or what happened here? And it's kind of like a mediation case. Both sides present. And at the end of the day, somebody wins and somebody loses. And that's what they're there to sort that out.
So that's the period that when a business owner comes and they want to set up a credit card processing, there's a bit of an underwriting, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Underwriting, just like you'd have underwriting in a mortgage or other, financial-based products. There is risk on the line because, again, banks are not knowing who you are face-to-face in most cases. All the other processors in the network, they're just taking it for granted that you say you're selling your widget for whatever price and you're legitimate and you're doing what you say you're supposed to do. And as soon as something hits the kind of ripple in the statistical model, then they're going to say, hey, that's a little bit outside of the norm of your sales activity. Maybe it was a large transaction. That's not a problem. Provide us an invoice, explain what's going on. And most of it is all a very reasonable and rational process. But what happens is if you don't respond or you're not working with that person like us who can facilitate those communications, then yeah, you can be in a world of hurt in some cases.
So we've done a good job, I think, of explaining to people why they need to have a rep that they can call on and somebody that understands and been around the industry a long time. What are some of the things you've seen, in terms of rates where people have really not been given a fair shake?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is going back to people that they call on, or when actually the people that are calling on the businesses. It's the telemarketing, the cold calls, the blanket emails that go out. I've been in the industry for, it would be coming up on 2 decades now. And I can honestly say I've never cold called. I've always worked by referral, which is why Plug for NIA, groups like this work for meeting other business owners. And so the biggest mistake is just going with somebody that you don't really know, because then you have no recourse. They might have been selling alarm systems before they were trying to do credit card processing. And before that, they were selling long distance. And who knows, when there's a problem, it's who's going to be there for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. And in terms of rates, do you see people being charged like, really an unequitable rate? I mean, if they're not paying attention or?
Well, there's rate as a whole is hard to get into because, again, the U.S. has so many different business models. It's unregulated. Generally, kind of on a statistical model, if most businesses that are doing a pretty high sales volume are over a 3 to 3.5%, that's really, there's got some wiggle room in there to really kind of broker that out or analyze it again. The challenge, though, is every business is so different, and every customer that comes into that has their own preference of card use. And then you balance that on top of the average tickets, the risk model that we said, what is the bank willing to do? Some businesses are fairly low risk. You walk into a restaurant, you eat that hamburger. In most cases, they've delivered the product and the service. There's no long-term warranty on it. It is what it is. And, but then if they go out of business, that's that. Just, just that's the process of how it works.
Yeah. So talk to us. Your concept here, paymentsgallery.com, is pretty unique. I'm not familiar with any other companies doing what you're doing. Would that be?
Well, yeah, you're right there. My partner Tim, we decided to basically, with all the changes going on in the industry, and it's kind of a convergence of a lot of things right now. A number of years ago, chip cards rolled out as a mandate, and I use the word mandate loosely because some people were under the perception that they would get fined, or if they weren't doing something properly, there'd be all sorts of problems. Really what it was is a liability switch. So if you were a business that chose not to upgrade into the chip card technology and you had fraudulent cards that came in and you were just using magnetic strips, now you're taking on the risk as opposed to the bank standing in there as a buffer to try to absorb that fraud loss. So now coming up in September or this fall, we'll be on about the 4-year mark for EMV chip card. It's hard to believe it's been that fast, but I still walk into businesses today that are swiping cards left and right behind the counter. And that tells me one of two things. One is if people didn't know better, they could go in there and party it up and live the high life and then go home and say, boy, I have no recollection of what happened. And by all rights and purposes, the bank would actually reverse that charge in favor of the customer. And I think the retail apocalypse, as we're constantly seeing in the news, there's probably a small segment of that has to do with a lot of that fraud because these point of sale systems, they're not keeping up with the technology. And there are businesses that are getting hit with not just hundreds of dollars a month, but thousands and $10,000s of dollars a month. And where you're operating on a small margin, I mean, that's a huge hit.
Wow. And then I've seen quite a few lately. You walk into a coffee shop or something, you've got sort of like an iPad there. And talk about that technology a little bit and how it relates to.
Yeah, so our showroom, we have everything from Windows technology and driven PC systems. Those are the larger, what we call more traditional setups that have the reliability of operating systems that have been in use for decades and decades. When iPad first came out as a consumer grade device, there was an immediate shift to use in the business environment, but it's not a ruggedized solution. Apple, because it's a consumer product, would push out updates at all different times of the day. So you could be in your busy time of your rush, and then all of a sudden Apple's doing a forced mandate, and all of a sudden your point of sale is locked down. That's not so common anymore, but through all the growing pains that have happened over the years, those are just things that we've seen and heard about. But most of the stuff now is really... And this is a big misperception. Years ago when you would open up a restaurant or a franchise, I mean, you would spend tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars to put a point of sale system in, and that would run your kitchen operations and maybe have touchscreen displays to run your orders through and all of that. And we're not even talking about the ability to do mobile ordering or online ordering and the Grubhub and the Uber Eats and the DoorDash and all that stuff now. Point of sale solutions can be just a few $1,000s per station, and you can incorporate all this really cool technology into it. And what happens is you're leveraging it as a competitive advantage. And that's what I think, we work with a lot of small businesses, and, speaking from experience, small business owners are notorious for being very slow on making good decisions. And it's just the nature of, I guess, what happens in thinking and analyzing things. But if you were opening up a restaurant down the road from me, and I was somebody who was kind of stuck in my ways, but you were rolling out a new system that had mobile ordering, automatic ability to drop DoorDash, Uber Eats, and all that into the point of sale, send it back to the kitchen, grab the walk-in traffic, get the third-party delivery drivers in. Now, all of a sudden, you are at a huge competitive advantage with me trying to catch up and do everything in a very manual process. Yeah. And that's the type of experience that we're rolling out there.
So you invite the customer, you try to get the customer to come into your location here in Houston.
Absolutely. Come and see it. Yeah.
And they can actually touch and feel, and y'all can have time to go through the different applications. It really comes down to what they're doing and what their needs are.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, out of an Android system, if somebody said, hey, I really heard good things about an Android system, that's what I want because I don't want to be captive to the Apple environment or whatever, then we'll look at 1, 2, 3, or 4 Android running systems. Same way with Windows, and then the same way with the Apple.
If you had to guess, how many different options are in the store?
So I would say we have a few dozen at least. And a lot of them, because a lot of the point of sale stuff is app driven, we can have one device set up but have multiple apps running on it and then open and close them. And a lot of the hardware is cross compatible, which is another advantage.
So if you're facing this decision around point of sale and payment processing, it's a lot bigger decision than a lot of the decisions you'll make as a business owner. I mean, nowadays it's not just about getting money in your bank the next day, but it really is driving a lot of different pieces of business. So I'd highly suggest you talk to Todd at paymentsgallery.com. Todd, before we go, you mentioned networking. I know you're a big networker. You're doing a lot of charity stuff. Talk to us just for a second about your charity event y'all hold annually.
Well, we're hoping to hold it annually. Last year was our first one.
Okay.
We did a drive for Toys for Tots, benefiting Lone Star Veterans Association. They just recently announced that they were going to be merging with Combined Arms, and Kevin Doffing is taking over that position. So all fantastic guys over there. They do a lot of great work in the Houston area. We found out just with the restructuring with Toys for Tots and the whole program, that had we not had all of our kind of affiliate small businesses collecting toys last year, that they just wouldn't have had the same Christmas for all their veterans' families that they would have. So we're excited to be able to do that. And we call it the Fall Crawl. So the website, if you're interested in looking at it from last year, is fallcrawlyall.com.
Awesome.
Nice little ring to it. Yeah.
And then networking. You've done a lot of networking in your past to build your business. Talk to us about your experience with NIA, if you will.
So I just love my moose. I forgot to put my button on today. I love my Moose. Moose is a good guy. I've known Moose for many years. We crossed paths just in the small business world many times. And when he said he was kicking it off, he had already had one group started. And I thought, you know what? I'm in a spot right now where I need to just really kind of hone in on my time. And the model of NIA with a once a month meeting and leveraging technology just kind of came at the right time. And so I said, you know what, I'll try it out. And I've been here ever since.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. Tell the audience how they reach you via email and phone, if you will.
Sure. So our website is paymentsgallery.com. Email address is service@paymentsgallery.com. Phone number is 832-781-4644. And then the other thing I didn't mention, I'm also an accredited certified payments professional. So that's kind of like the equivalent of being certified in a financial services arena, financial planner. So I kind of liken it to, you could invest your money with somebody like Bernie Madoff, or you could invest it with somebody who's actually a certified financial planner. The same thing goes with payment processing. So when you're choosing a provider, look for somebody who's got a CPP credentialing, and that'll just deliver additional peace of mind.
Great advice. Thanks, Todd, for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.